Hello everyone. Find a comfortable position. This isn't just a story we're telling. It's a world we're stepping into. A world of roaring engines, of freezing cold, of sheer, unadulterated terror, and of a bizarre, brutal kind of beauty. We're climbing into the cockpit of a machine that defied logic. A 7-ton behemoth of aluminum, steel, and American industrial might called the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. Its pilots called it the Jug, short for Juggernaut. And for the young men tasked with flying it over occupied Europe, every mission was a lesson in survival, a test of nerve, and a dance with physics that often ended in fire. If you've ever looked up at a peaceful sky and tried to imagine it filled with flak and falling aircraft, if you've ever wondered about the men who before they were old enough to buy a drink, were entrusted with a weapon of mass destruction, and sent to fight the most experienced air force in the world, then pull up the blanket, turn down the lights. This is for you. Before we begin this long, dangerous patrol, if you find yourself drawn into this forgotten world, do the memory of those pilots a service. Like the video, subscribe to the channel for more journeys into the past, and drop a comment. Tell me where you're listening from, or if you have a family story from this era. I read them all, often late at night, with a cup of something strong, trying to fathom the courage it took to do what they did. Now, let the modern world fade away. Let the glow of your screen be our instrument panel in the vast, dark unknown. Get comfortable. A Thunderbolt pilot would be swaddled in an electrically heated suit, a marvel of technology that was utterly useless, either leaving you shivering in a block of ice or slowly simmering you in your own sweat. There was no middle ground. All this just to survive the environment at 30,000 feet, where the temperature could plunge to 60 below zero, and the very air was too thin to breathe, without a mask feeding you oxygen like a hospital patient. But let's pause for a single, heart-thumping second. Did you know that after a long, high-altitude mission, pilots often had to be physically lifted from their cockpits, their bodies locked into a permanent, aching crouch from hours of tension? What did they eat during those 6-hour patrols over hostile territory? It was a mysterious beige paste squeezed from a tube, tasting of despair and vague chicken, designed for sustenance, not pleasure. Was the first unwritten rule of survival in a P-47, never ever fly straight and level for more than 10 seconds, actually printed in the manual? Or was it learned in the most brutal classroom of all, a sky full of German cannon shells? How many of these massive planes were lost, not to enemy fire, but to the sheer bowel-loosening terror of a compressibility dive where the controls would freeze solid as the aircraft approached the sound barrier, the earth swelling in the windshield in a silent, screaming promise of impact? And why, for the love of God, was the pre-mission briefing officer as calm instruction to watch for contrails, not immediately followed by a screaming, desperate addendum from a veteran? Seriously, they are already above you. They have the angled sun and the experience, and you are about to die if you don't move now. Congratulations. Your old life, the one of safety and comfort, is over. Your new reality begins at dawn on April 8, 1943. You are a new fish, a replacement pilot with the 4th Fighter Group, your stomach doing acrobatics somewhere over the cold, gray, merciless expanse of the English Channel. Your oxygen mask tastes of 100 other men's fear and the stale, chemical tang of rubber. The voice in your headset, crackling with static that sounds like frying bacon, is calm, too calm. Bandits. 11 o'clock high. Look alive. Bandits. The word itself is a punch to the gut. They are here. And you are in a plane the Germans laugh at. Good luck. You're going to need it. The making of a pilot, from Kansas to a cockpit. To understand the Jug, you have to understand the boy who flew it. Your journey didn't start over France. It started in the endless, flat plains of Texas or Arizona, at a training field that baked in the sun and smelled of dust, aviation fuel, and youthful ambition. You were a kid, maybe 19, 20 years old. You'd spent your childhood building model planes, reading pulp magazines about aerial aces, and dreaming of glory. The Army Air Forces promised to make you a pilot, a knight of the sky. What they delivered first was a decade's worth of character-building misery, compressed into a few brutal months. Your first plane was a Piper Cub or a Stearman biplane, a fragile thing of fabric and wood that bucked and shuddered in the wind. Your instructor was a man who had seen too much and smoked too many cigarettes, a veteran of maybe 20, who spoke in grunts and sighed with the weight of the world every time you bounced a landing. "You're not trying to kill a bird with a rock, son," he'd drawl. "You're landing an aircraft. There's a difference. Find it. You learn to take off, to land, to loop and spin and stall. You learned that throwing up in a small, vibrating cockpit was a rite of passage, and that the smell of your own vomit would be a perfume you'd come to know intimately. The food in the mess hall was a crime against cuisine. Gray meat, lumpy potatoes, and a substance they called coffee that could strip paint. You ate it because you were always hungry, your body burning through fear and adrenaline like coal in a furnace. Then, you graduated to the T-6 Texan, a more powerful trainer. It felt like a real fighter. It had a radio, a retractable landing gear, and a nasty tendency to ground loop if you treated its tailwheel with disrespect. You lost classmates. Not to the enemy, but to the sky itself. A mid-air collision during formation practice. A stall on final approach. A sudden, inexplicable spin from which there was no recovery. You'd sit at an empty place in the mess hall, the silence louder than any engine, and understand the first real rule of this war. The sky doesn't care. It will kill you just as dead as a German ace, and it's often far less merciful. After what felt like a lifetime, you received your wings. A pair of silver wings pinned to your chest, a symbol of achievement that felt heavier than lead. You were a pilot. You felt like a king. And then they showed you your mount, the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. The first time you saw it, your heart sank. It was enormous. It wasn't sleek or graceful. It was corpulent. A barrel-shaped fuselage, a massive round nose hiding the 18-cylinder double Wasp engine, and wings that seemed too short for its girth. It sat on its landing gear with the awkward stance of a weightlifter. Climbing up to the cockpit was a physical effort. Sliding inside was like wedging yourself into a metal tub. The cockpit was roomy, they said. What they meant was it was filled with levers, switches, and dials, a bewildering array of potential failures. The manual was thicker than a family Bible, and twice as confusing. Your first flight was a revelation in terror. Starting the engine was an event. The propeller blades became a blur, the whole airframe shaking with a deep, visceral rumble that you felt in your teeth and your soul. The torque was immense, trying to drag you off the runway. You took off, and it felt less like flying and more like convincing a very heavy, very reluctant building to leave the ground. It was not nimble. It was not responsive. It was a locomotive that had been given wings and a serious attitude problem. You landed, sweating and shaking, and the crew chief just grinned. "She's a handful, ain't she? You'll get used to it." You didn't believe him. Hiding the 18-cylinder double Wasp engine and wings that seemed too short for its girth. It sat on its landing gear with the awkward stance of a weightlifter. Climbing up to the cockpit was a physical effort. Sliding inside was like wedging yourself into a metal tub. The cockpit was roomy, they said. What they meant was it was filled with levers, switches, and dials, a bewildering array of potential failures. The manual was thicker than a family Bible and twice as confusing. Your first flight was a revelation in terror. Starting the engine was an event. The propeller blades became a blur, the whole airframe shaking with a deep, visceral rumble that you felt in your teeth and your soul. The torque was immense, trying to drag you off the runway. You took off, and it felt less like flying and more like convincing a very heavy, very reluctant building to leave the ground. It was not nimble. It was not responsive. It was a locomotive that had been given wings and a serious attitude problem. You landed, sweating and shaking, and the crew chief just grinned. "She's a handful, ain't she? You'll get used to it." You didn't believe him. The anatomy of a juggernaut, more than a flying milk bottle. Before we strap in, let's understand this machine. The P-47 wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated rebellion. While the Germans and British refined the art of the lightweight, nimble dogfighter, a man named Alexander Kartveli, a Georgian-born designer for Republic Aviation, looked at the requirements for a high-altitude interceptor and decided to build a tank that could fly. The heart of the beast was the Pratt & Whitney R2-800 double wasp engine. It wasn't just an engine. It was a mechanical city with 18 cylinders, a displacement of 2,800 cubic inches, and when it was running, it was the equivalent of a contained, continuous explosion, generating over 2,000 horsepower. But the real genius, the secret sauce that turned this lumbering giant into a high-altitude king, was hidden in the belly of the plane, the turbo supercharger. This wasn't a simple supercharger. It was a complex system of ducts and pipes that ran from the engine down the fuselage to a turbine driven by the engine's own exhaust gases. This turbine spun a compressor that forced dense, oxygen-rich air back into the engine, allowing it to breathe easily at altitudes where other fighters gasped and wheezed. At 30,000 feet, a Spitfire's engine was struggling for breath. The Thunderbolt's was just hitting its stride. This system was so complex and took up so much space that the cockpit had to be placed far back on the fuselage, giving the P-47 its distinctive, pregnant profile. You weren't sitting in front of the engine. You were sitting on top of its complicated, volatile life support system. And then there was the weight. Empty, it weighed over 10,000 pounds. The aluminum coffin, a tour of your flying office. Let's take a proper tour of your new office, the cockpit of the Republic P-47D. Forget the glamour. This is a no-nonsense industrial workhouse. It's a space more cramped than a coffin and twice as final. The much-vaunted greenhouse canopy is a scratched, hazy, and flimsy window to a world that is actively trying to murder you. It's held on by a few latches you pray will hold during a high-G maneuver. The air is a stale cocktail of high-octane fuel fumes, hot engine oil, ozone from the sputtering electrical systems, the greasy smell of the rubber oxygen mask, and the sharp, coppery tang of your own sweat. It's not even 10 a.m., and the sun is a weak, distant hole punched in a sky the color of faded denim, offering no warmth, only a blinding glare. You're barely settled onto your seat, a thin, worn cushion atop a slab of cold steel armor plate that is supposed to stop 20mm cannon shells. You hope you never have to test it. The instrument panel is a chaotic, overwhelming mosaic of black outlined dials, nervously wobbling needles, and the odd, cryptic warning light you hope you never, ever learn the meaning of. From left to right, the altimeter, your lifeline telling you how much sky you have beneath you. The airspeed indicator, because speed is life. The artificial horizon, for when you're in a cloud and the world has vanished. The turn and bank indicator. The tachometer, showing the engine's frantic heartbeat. The manifold pressure gauge. And a dozen others, all demanding your attention. A mechanical hazard only slightly less risky than the actual fully armed German Air Force waiting for you in the sun. You shiver a deep bone-level tremor that has nothing to do with the sub-zero temperature, and everything to do with the knowledge that your every move from this moment on is governed by an unspoken brutal list of rules for surviving in this particular dinosaur. Let's go over them one more time, like a prayer. Number 1. Never, ever try to turn with a Messerschmitt 109. You will lose. It will outturn you, dance around you, and plant a 20mm cannon shell in your back. Number 2. If you see a Focke-Wulf 190's distinctive, squared-off wings, shove the throttle through the firewall, jam the stick forward, and point your nose at the ground like you're trying to dig a hole to China. Pray that your dive brakes work. Number 3. All 8 of your 50 caliber Browning machine guns must be treated with the reverence of holy relics, for they are the only things standing between you and a one-way fiery trip into a French farmer's field. They are your saviors and your only voice. The world outside your fragile plexiglass bubble is a terrifyingly vast and empty void loosely defined by a fading patch of cumulus cloud, a breaking formation of B-17s, looking like pregnant ducks, and what may have once been your confidence, now rapidly evaporating. Here you are expected to fly, fight, and survive, which in practice means you should never relax. You're scanned for more than a second, never take a full deep breath, and never under any circumstances invent a maneuver that involves anything resembling a graceful turning dogfight. That is a dance of death, and you are not invited. At any moment, a voice shredded by static might tear through your headset to remind you that idle hands are the devil's workshop. So you quickly pretend to be scanning your sector with the hyper-focused intensity of a hawk, a skill you secretly intend to master later, if you live long enough. At the center of your trembling existence is the control stick. It's not an instrument of finesse. It's a lever for brute force, for manhandling 2,000 wild, roaring horses, and for occasionally beating the side of the cockpit in sheer, impotent frustration when the radio dies for the 3rd time. Your plane itself is the true, unyielding ruler of this tiny, vibrating kingdom. A steely-eyed beast of riveted aluminum and steel that can silence your bravado with a single ominous engine cough or a sudden, unexplained shudder. It's part therapist, part drill sergeant, and possibly part flying anvil. Its design philosophy is best described as build's character may cause minor heart attacks. The wings are not for graceful flight. They are sturdy platforms for guns, all 3,400 rounds of ammunition, a combined rate of fire of 6,000 rounds per minute that could shred a locomotive into confetti in seconds. The engine, a Pratt & Whitney R280 O double wasp, is less a piece of machinery and more a contained, ongoing explosion that you are politely, desperately asking to keep contained for just a few more hours. You take your first real bite of the high-altitude air. It tastes like rubber from your oxygen mask, and the vague, desperate hope of making it back to the mess hall for a supper you might still be too terrified to eat. The air up here is thin, occasionally trying to shake your plane apart with turbulence, and sometimes alarmingly full of black, blooming puffs of flak that smell of cordite even through the sealed canopy. If you ask a veteran what it's like, he'll always grunt and say, "You'll get used to it," which you come to understand is code for, "You'll be too numb with terror to notice anymore." You fly dutifully, hands gripping the controls like a drowning man clings to driftwood, your teeth squeaking over the occasional jolt that feels suspiciously like a near miss you didn't even see. Comfort? Hot meals? A smooth, peaceful flight? Don't even ask. Comfort is for the officers' club, a distant, hazy memory. A smooth flight is a myth spoken of in hushed tones, an experience only reported on the long, gentle descent back to base with a dead engine and your luck almost run out. On special days, your first confirmed kill a successful escort where all the bombers came home, or that one miraculous time you didn't throw up in your oxygen mask. There might be an extra unwatered shot of whiskey in your coffee, or the ceremonial division of a single bruised orange among your squadron mates. Otherwise, the only real variety is the specific flavor of terror. Some days it's the slow, creeping dread of a high-altitude bounce you never see coming. Others, it's the solid, gut-punch fear of seeing glowing tracers arc past your canopy, so close you can feel the heat and smell the ozone. Either way, you fly it. The commanders, safe on the ground with their clean maps and wooden pointers, are full full of advice about the moral and tactical benefits of a boom and zoom attack. It builds character, they say, handing you a flight manual that doubles as a doorstop. It conserves energy, they insist. Never mind that your energy is mainly in need of a week of uninterrupted sleep and a therapist who doesn't exist. Back at the base, you'll see technical diagrams of German fighters with neat little arrows pointing to their fuel lines and coolant systems. You might beg, just once, to fly something elegant and nimble like a Spitfire, but your CO is unmoved. He reminds you that the Thunderbolt's secret to longevity is simple, fair, and daily discomfort. You start to suspect the plane was designed by a brilliant, Georgian-born misanthrope named Alexander Kartvili, who really, truly disliked pilots. After the mission, you're sent off to debriefing, fortified only in the sense that your expectations for your own lifespan can't possibly get any lower. If you manage to sneak a piece of hard, waxy chocolate from your escape kit, or steal a single, glorious moment of absolute quiet alone on the flight line after everyone has gone, you're living large. You've beaten the system. Just don't let the crew chief catch you, or you'll face a lecture on discipline and the evils of getting grease on your supposedly pristine flight suit. By the time the massive, four-bladed propeller sighs to a stop, and you climb down on legs that feel like overcooked spaghetti, you've done it. You've cheated the sky, the Germans, and physics for one more day. You tiptoe past the grumbling, exhausted maintenance crews, the true wizards who keep these complex beasts in the air with chewing, gum, and sheer will back into the safety of the dampness and hot. Here, surrounded by the familiar smells of damp wool, boot polish, and fear, you can finally exhale. Perhaps you'll whisper a dark, grim joke to your bunkmate, or just lie in the dark, listening to the rain on the roof, celebrating another day you never thought you'd see. In the skies over Europe, survival isn't about being the best. It's about being the most stubborn. Patience isn't just a virtue. It's the only guaranteed weapon you have. The laughter dies, Robert Johnson and the unkillable Jug. The transformation from mockery to myth didn't happen in a boardroom or a design bureau. It happened in the shattered, oil-streaked sky over France, inside a specific Thunderbolt, serial number 416235, piloted by a 23-year-old former football player from Lawton, Oklahoma, named Robert S. Johnson. His story is the moment the theory of the Jug S toughness was tested in the most violent laboratory imaginable. Imagine the scene. It's not a clean tactical diagram. It's chaos. Your formation is a cluster of heavy, climbing shapes. The bomber stream, a distant constellation of silver specks ahead. The sun is a weapon, and the Germans own it. The first warning is a frantic, distorted scream in your headset, cut short. Then, the world explodes. Not a single bang, but a rapid, percussive thump-thump, crack-thump that hammers through the airframe. For Johnson, it was a perfect bounce by the experts of JG-26. A 20mm cannon shell explodes against his canopy rail, shredding the plexiglass into a blizzard of razor-sharp fragments that slice his nose and fill his lap. The hydraulic system is gutted, spraying foul-smelling, slippery fluid across the cockpit, coating his instruments, his gloves, everything. The smell is acrid, like a burning clutch mixed with cordite. Fire erupts behind the instrument panel. The engine, that magnificent double wasp, begins to run rough, shaking the entire airframe with a sickening, dying vibration. He's wounded, his plane is dying, and the instinct is to escape. He reaches for the canopy release. It doesn't move. A cannon shell has detonated in the track, welding it shut. He is trapped. This is the ultimate nightmare. You are not just a pilot in a damaged aircraft. You are a soul locked in a falling, flaming coffin, 27,000 feet above enemy territory. The terror is not abstract. It's a physical weight on your chest, a coldness that has nothing to do with the altitude. What happens next is a 10-minute lesson in survival that defies all logic. with no forward visibility through an oil-smeared windscreen, a failing engine, and controls that feel like they're moving through mud, Johnson points the wreck west. And then the second act of the drama begins. A lone FW-190, its pilot likely a veteran, sees the cripple and moves in for the kill. This is where the German's confidence turns to confusion, then to something akin to superstitious dread. He makes his first pass, his cannon firing. The Thunderbolt shudders with each impact. Crumph, crumph, crumph. Johnson can only huddle behind his armor plate, praying it holds. The German pilot, expecting the kill, peels away and looks back. The Jug is still flying. He repositions, his cannon ammunition exhausted, and opens up with his rifle caliber machine guns. The sound is a relentless sewing machine rat-tat-tat-tat against the Jug's metal skin. Still, it flies. He makes pass after pass, until his guns fall silent, completely out of ammunition. He pulls his pristine fighter alongside the flying wreckage. Johnson, through his shattered canopy, can see the German's face. He's close enough to see his expression shift from professional determination to utter, bewildered disbelief. He stares at the perforated, smoking, but still airworthy Thunderbolt, shakes his head in a gesture that is part frustration, part awe, and peels away for good. Johnson's landing at Manston is a controlled crash. The crew chief's report is a testament to the impossible. Over 200 holes, 21 of them from 20mm cannon shells. One had exploded inches from his head. 3 of the 4 main structural longerons were severed. The plane was, by all rights, a collection of parts that had no business staying connected. The story ripped through the 8th Air Force. The Germans, upon debriefing their pilots, initially dismissed it as exaggeration, but the evidence was there. The laughter was over. The Thunderbolt wasn't just tough. It was, for the men who flew it, a supernatural guardian. For the Germans, it was a omen. You could pour everything you had into it, and it would just keep coming. The sledgehammers swing, boom, zoom, and the paddle blade revolution. The early failures weren't because the P-47 was a bad fighter. They were because its pilots were trying to fight a German fight. The revelation, pioneered by men like Hubzenk and Gabi Gabreski, was that the Jug didn't need to win a knife fight. It could simply drop an anvil from a great height. Let's break down boom and zoom, the mantra that became a religion for Thunderbolt pilots. It's a dance in 3 acts, a ballet of pure physics. Act 1, the perch. You don't fight them down low. You use your turbo-supercharged engine, your one undeniable advantage, to climb. You climb until the air is so thin your breath comes in sharp, dry gasps from the oxygen mask. You climb to 30,000, 32,000, even 35,000 feet. Up here, the world is a curved, blue-tinted map. The B-17s are tiny silver crosses below. The German fighters are specks, struggling in the thin air, their engines gasping, their controls mushy. You own this domain. You are the eagle, and they are the pigeons. Act 2, the boom. You spot your prey. A flight of 109s circling below, waiting to pounce on the bombers. You don't turn. You don't maneuver. You simply roll your 7-ton fighter inverted. For a second, you're looking at the sky below your feet. Then you pull the stick back, the nose drops, and you fall. This isn't a dive, it's a controlled plummet. You push the throttle through the gate into war emergency power. The double wasp screams. The airspeed indicator needle winds up past 400, past 450, past 500 miles per hour. The airframe begins to shake, a low-frequency vibration that rattles your bones. The sound is a rising, howling shriek of wind. You are the fastest thing in the sky, a bullet fired from God's own rifle. The German pilot might never even see you. You are a blur, a shadow, a sudden, terrifying presence in his periphery. You don't try fancy deflection shots. You point your entire aircraft at him, your 8 guns creating a cone of destruction. At 300 yards, you press the trigger. For 2 seconds, the world vanishes in the muzzle flash and the hammering vibration of your guns. A stream of 850 caliber rounds pours out. You don't need to hit a specific part. You simply need to fly through the space he occupies. The target doesn't get shot down. It disintegrates, comes apart in a cloud of metal confetti and a sudden blooming flower of orange flame. You don't watch. You're already gone. Act 3. The zoom. You've traded 10,000 feet of altitude for an unimaginable amount of speed. Now, you convert it back. You don't turn. You pull back on the stick, a steady, firm, high G pull. The jug, for all its weight, surges upward, climbing at an angle that defies its appearance. You are a rocket, using your kinetic energy to reclaim your throne in the stratosphere. The German pilots below, if any survived, can only watch you go. They cannot follow. They cannot climb to your altitude. You are untouchable. You have struck with the force of a sledgehammer and vanished before the echo has faded. This tactical revolution was perfected with the P-47D-22 and its paddle blade propeller. The new blades were wider, broader, like the oars of a Viking longship. They bit into the thin air with a new ferocity. The climb rate, once a pathetic joke, improved by over 30%. Now, a jug could not only dive like a demon, it could climb with a vengeance. The sound changed too. The deep, thrumming roar acquired a sharper, more aggressive edge, sound German pilots learned to fear. It was the sound of the anvil learning to fly uphill. The sound of thunder. The jug is a fighter bomber. After D-Day, the war changed. The sky was won. The battle was now on the ground, in the hedgerows and villages of Normandy. And the P-47 found its ultimate, terrifying purpose. Stripped of its long-range tanks, it became a battlefield weapon, a jawbow. Imagine you are a young German soldier in the Panzer Lehr division. You've heard stories, but nothing prepares you. The first thing you hear is not a plane, but a sound. A deep, approaching rumble that seems to come from everywhere at once. It's not the high-pitched whine of a Messerschmitt. This is lower, more visceral. It's the sound of an approaching earthquake. Donnerschlag, thunderclap, and you see them. Not high in the sky, but low, skimming the treetops. So low you can see the dull green and gray camouflage, the invasion stripes, the individual exhaust stacks belching smoke. They come in line abreast, a wall of flying destruction. There is no hiding. If you're in a column of trucks, you are a caterpillar on a sidewalk. The lead jug waggles its wings. That's the signal. The world then dissolves into a hell beyond comprehension. The sound of their guns is not a rat-tat-tat. It is a sustained, ripping, tearing bi-rare that lasts for 5, 6, 7 seconds. It is the sound of a giant sheet of canvas being torn in half directly over your head. You don't hear individual shots. You hear a solid wall of noise. And what it does to its target is apocalyptic. A truck doesn't just get holes. It is shredded. It erupts in flame, its cargo and occupants obliterated. A tank, hit from above where its armor is thin, can have its engine compartment turned into a Swiss cheese of molten steel. But the guns are just the opening act. Under its wings, the jug can carry a load that would make a medium bomber from 1940 blush. 2 1,000-pound bombs, or 10 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, HVARs. The bombs fall away with a heavy thunk. For a few seconds, there is silence as they arc down. Then the ground heaves. 2 simultaneous, massive geysers of dirt, fire, and fragmented metal erupt, swallowing anything nearby. The rockets are even more personal. With a sharp whoosh whoosh whoosh, they leap from their rails, leaving trails of white smoke, screaming towards their target. Each rocket has the punch of a naval artillery shell. A single hit can vaporize a tank, a bunker, a house. The psychological effect is total, utter, paralyzing terror. There is no defense. No foxhole is deep enough. The Jabos own the day, and the day belongs to them. For the German army in Normandy, the P-47 became the physical manifestation of Allied air supremacy, a relentless, unavoidable, roaring angel of death. The empty bunks, the cost of business, the victory, the aces, the legends, they were paid for in a currency measured in empty chairs in the mess hall and silent bunks in the Nissen hut. The glamour of being a fighter pilot was a thin veneer over a reality of profound, grinding loss. You return from a mission. The debriefing is a blur of technical details. I saw a 109 at 2 o'clock low. I fired a 2-second burst. He spun in. The words are clinical. A shield against the reality that you just ended a human life, or watched a friend cease to exist. You walk back to the hut, the adrenaline fading, leaving a hollow, cold exhaustion. You push open the door. The hut smells of wax, damp wool, and cigarette smoke. And you see it. His bunk is already stripped. The thin mattress is gone. The personal photos of a girl back home, a family, a dog all gone, packed up by the squadron clerk. The space is just ... empty. It's a void that sucks the sound and warmth out of the room. You don't talk about it. You can't. What is there to say? You sit on your own bunk and clean your .45 sidearm for the 10th time that day, just to have something to do with your hands. The silence is a physical presence. Later, at the officers' club, the laughter is a little too loud, the drinking a little too determined. This is where the term flak happy was born. It wasn't a medical diagnosis. It was a visible unraveling. A pilot who had been steady and sharp would start jumping at the sound of a jeep backfiring. He'd develop a facial tic. He'd stare into the middle distance, his eyes not seeing the room, but a sky full of flak and tracers. He was still breathing, but a part of him had already been shot down over Bremen or Berlin. They were boys, most of them. They carried the weight of command decisions, the lives of bomber crews, and their own survival on shoulders not yet broad enough. They wrote cheerful, lies-filled letters home, assuring Mom and Dad they were safe, while the man in the bunk next to them wrote the same letter last week and was now a line in a casualty report. The cost wasn't just in the air. It was in the slow erosion of their youth and the nightmares that would follow them for 50 years. In the unspoken understanding that the bond they shared in this hut was the deepest and most painful they would ever know. Part 9. The long road home. A life after the Jug VE day arrives not with a bang, but with a surreal, disorienting quiet. The roaring, the alerts, the frantic briefings, it all just stops. There is no more mission board. The sky is suddenly, unnervingly empty of anything but birds. You pack your footlocker. The souvenirs, a piece of FW-190, a Luger, a crumpled Nazi flag, feel like artifacts from another man's life. The journey home is a reverse of the one that brought you to war. The troopship is the same, but the mood is different. There is relief, but it's muted, contemplative. You are not the boy who left. You are a man who has lived a lifetime in 2 years. You have been colder, more terrified, and more alive than you ever thought possible. You return to a hero's welcome, but you feel like a fraud. How do you explain what it was like to people who spent the war working in factories or growing food? How do you describe the smell of cordite and blood, the sound of a friend's last, static-filled transmission, the sight of a city burning from 20,000 feet? You don't. You learn to lock it away in a part of yourself that you never show anyone. You get a job, start a family, build a life. But the war is always there, just beneath the surface. A car backfiring sends you diving for cover. A certain type of cloud in the sky can bring it all back. And at night, you still dream. You dream of the cockpit, of the stick in your hand, of the gauges. You dream of the jug. And at the reunions, every few years, you meet the other old men, the ones who understand. And you don't talk about the fear or the loss. You talk about the airplane. You talk about the time old Horse Johnson brought his plane back with no canopy and half a tail. You laugh about the brutal landings, the temperamental radios, the sheer, stubborn ornariness of the machine. You loved it, not because it was beautiful or graceful, but because it was strong. It was loyal. It was a part of you. That ungainly, brutish, magnificent jug was the vessel that carried you through the fire and brought you home. It was more than a machine. It was a brother in arms. And as you sit with your old friends, your hands no longer steady, your hair gone gray, you realize that a part of you never truly climbed out of that cockpit. A part of you is still up there, in the cold, thin air, riding the thunder.